Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashoda Nandana vṛttyā Ranjana. Yashoda Nandana vṛttyā Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashoda Nandana vṛttyā Ranjana. Yashoda Nandana vṛttyā Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Rukmini Dwarkadish, Rukmini Dwarkadish, Rukmini Dwarkadish, Rukmini Dwarkadish. Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadra. Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Srila Prabhupada. Gaur Premanandi, Hayaribo, Jaya Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Parivrajak Acharya Asatara Sasa Sri Shivan, ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivinoda Swami, Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitya Lila Prabhupada, Om Vishnupad Divine Grace, Srila Bhakta Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Nam Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sakahoch Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita. Gadadhara Shivasati Gaurbhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopana Shamakunda Radhakunda Gira Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Brajamumi Namanam Ki Jai. Shri Nabadip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Lachal Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shrimati Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Your most beautiful Lordship Shri Shukmini Dwarkadish Ki Jai. Shri Shukmini Dwarkanath Ki Jai. Shri Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ki Jai. Shri Shri Gaurnitai Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Going back to home, back to Godhead Ki Jai. ISKCON Los Angeles Yatra Ki Jai. Brihad Madanga Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai. International Food for Life Transcendental Prasadam Distribution Ki Jai. Shri Harinam's Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gaurang. Glory to the Prophet. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Deving Sarasatim Yasam Tato Jayamatirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, let us offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of God and Lord Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, who is the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashna prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttima shloke bhaktir bhavati naistiki. By regularly attending the Srimad Bhagavatam class and by rendering service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, whose worship with transcendental songs is established as an irrevocable fact. Open the door, let some air come in, and make sure the windows upstairs are open. COVID is again outbreaking, and one of the main ways it's transmitted is when people are confined in a space with no air. So we should always make sure the windows upstairs are open. These two doors should be open so we get a cross flow. We're not just sitting in each other's breath, okay? Every time I sit here, I have to indicate that, but we should just do it as a matter of fact. Whenever there's no kirtan and we're having a class, the doors can be open. We only close it because of the kirtans. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're continuing reading from the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is entitled The Status Quo. This is chapter 26, Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. And today's verse is 14. Mano buddhir ahaṅkāraś cittam antar-ātmakam caturdhā lakṣyate bhedo vṛttyā lakṣaṇa-rūpayā mano buddhir ahaṅkāraś cittam antar-ātmakam caturdhā lakṣyate bhedo vṛttyā lakṣaṇa-rūpayā mano buddhir ahaṅkāraś cittam antar-ātmakam caturdhā lakṣyate bhedo vṛttyā lakṣaṇa-rūpayā. please chant. Open this door. Cittam antar-ātmakam caturdhā lakṣyate bhedo vṛttyā lakṣaṇa-rūpayā cittam antar-ātmakam caturdhā lakṣyate bhedo vṛttyā lakṣaṇa-rūpayā mano buddhir ahaṅkāraś antar-ātmakam caturdhā lakṣyate bhedo vṛttyā lakṣaṇa-rūpayā mano buddhir ahaṅkāraś cittam antar-ātmakam caturdhā lakṣyate bhedo vṛttyā lakṣaṇa-rūpayā. Vaishnavis. Mano buddhir ahaṅkāraś cittam antar-ātmakam caturdhā lakṣyate bhedo vṛttyā lakṣaṇa-rūpayā mano buddhir ahaṅkāraś cittam antar-ātmakam caturdhā lakṣyate bhedo vṛttyā lakṣaṇa-rūpayā. Okay, synonyms: manaḥ, the mind; buddhiḥ, intelligence; ahaṅkāraḥ, ego; cittam, consciousness; iti, thus; antaḥ-ātmakam, the internal subtle senses; caturdhā, having four aspects; lakṣyate, is observed; bhedaḥ, the distinction; vṛttyā, by their functions; lakṣaṇa-rūpayā, representing different characteristics. Srila Prabhupada's translation for this verse: the internal subtle senses are experienced as having four aspects in the shape of mind, intelligence, ego, and contaminated consciousness. Distinctions between them can be made only by different functions, since they represent different characteristics. Please repeat. The internal subtle senses are experienced as having four aspects: in the shape of mind, intelligence, ego, and contaminated consciousness. Distinctions between them can be made only by different functions, since they represent different characteristics. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The four internal senses, or subtle senses, described herein are defined by different characteristics. When pure consciousness is polluted by material contamination, and when identification with the body becomes prominent, one is said to be situated under false ego. Consciousness is a function of the soul, and therefore behind consciousness there is soul. Consciousness polluted by material contamination is called ahaṅkāra. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Tinamini. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavani Paschyachadeshtarni. Om Agyana Tamarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishnang Shnapitang Jaina Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeyahang Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragana Tanbatam Tang Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitangscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishamanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanang Pavanebhyo Vaishyavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I take it for granted we've all heard the phrase, the emphatic phrase, God is love. Yes? So, those who are atheists naturally inquire, if God is love, how come there's so much hate in the world? If God is love and God is in control of everything and everyone, how come there's so much hate in this world? So much animosity, wars, violence, every day, practically at every moment. Not just in human society, but in animal society, everywhere you look. Humans to animals, animals to human, everywhere you look, there is fighting and killing. And so how is that possible? If God is love and God is in control of everything and everyone, how does this exist? So this is one of the things we'll understand by very carefully hearing the discourse between Kapila Deva and his mother Devahuti. Now, Prabhupada was asked directly this question. Many of you have read the book Life Comes from Life, which is a conversation between Dr. Singh, who later became Bhakti Sarup Damodar Goswami, and Srila Prabhupada. So there is one section you may or may not recall, but I'll read it. Those who have never read it, I say you should read that book. So let's see, where is that? Okay, here. So that section is entitled The Absolute Nature of Krishna's Love. Dr. Singh. In some Western theological literature, Srila Prabhupada, they say that God is love. Srila Prabhupada, God is everything. Why do they say he is this or that? Anything is God because he is absolute. His love and his enmity are the same. In the material world, we distinguish between love and animosity. But God's animosity and God's love are the same thing. Therefore, he is called achintya, or inconceivable. God's love for the gopis and God's enmity for Kamsa achieved the same result. Both Kamsa and the gopis went to the spiritual world. Also, Putana came to poison Krishna, and Mother Yashoda was always anxious to save Krishna, the naughty child, lest he be harmed. So, Mother Yashoda and Putana are opposite, but they both achieved the same result. Krishna thought, quote, I have sucked Putana's breast, so now she is my mother. She must reach the same destination as Yashoda. This is the absolute nature of Krishna's enmity and Krishna's love. So that explains God's position, but our position is not the same. Our love and animosity are definitely not the same. So how is it that we come to this platform of animosity, hatred towards other living entities? How is it that we come to that point? I'll give you a chance to chime in, but... So this is one of the dangers of becoming an imitation God. We have to clearly understand so that we can clearly explain that this material world is a place created where we can come and imitate God, try to become God. God gives us that facility. Understanding himself, obviously, and establishing through his presentation to us in his various incarnations that we are eternal. So when we think, as is described in the 16th chapter, he's my enemy and I've killed him and my other enemies will also be killed. You can't kill anybody. You can destroy this body, which will ultimately be destroyed anyway, which is another thing we'll learn in this section of the Bhagavatam clearly. The body is perishable, in case we've forgotten. Today, tomorrow, 100 tomorrows from today, this body will not exist anymore. But we will continue to exist. So this is why Krishna, as a loving Father, allows us to come here and become destructive children, which is what we do. Gradually, the consciousness, the pure consciousness, becomes contaminated, as is mentioned here today. Contaminated consciousness is one of the 4 items mentioned today. Becomes so contaminated that we develop desire to kill other people, other entities. The pure living entity coming from the spiritual world where everything is perfect. There's no question of death. There's no question of animosity, of killing. None of that exists there. But when we come to this material world, we become so covered that gradually we develop a desire to kill others. Prabhupada said, what is your credit if you kill somebody? They're going to die anyway. But still we develop this strong desire to kill others. Please turn all phones to silent mode so there's no disturbance. Thank you. So, this is due to ignorance. By not understanding what our existential possession is, we descend into such ignorance, the pure consciousness, the pure knowledge of the soul is covered so much that we desire to kill another living entity. So going back to the fundamentals is essential over and over again. Rabindranath and I were discussing this morning. He saw that phrase in one of Prabhupada's books, that repetition is necessary for developing understanding. So we have to be told repeatedly that we're not this body. And if we come to the point of realization of that fact, then we automatically understand that others are not their bodies, and we stop treating them like bodies, which we actually do in both extremes. We treat somebody as a body that we want to enjoy. Nothing really enjoyable there if you look at the nature of the body. And we treat others as a body that we want to get rid of because they're impeding our enjoyment in some way or the other. Just on a funny note, yesterday, no, not yesterday, or maybe yesterday or the day before, you were walking in front of my building, dressed in a tank top, you know, a handsome guy, and some girl was coming behind him with her dog, and she was literally drooling over him. Literally drooling over this young man. So that's what we do in material consciousness. We become so covered over that we drool over that which is not drool-worthy, namely the material body. So, and it's not a first instance. Even in the Mahabharata, you'll read that the twins, Nakula and Sahadev, they were so handsome that when they went into exile, they had to remain covered all the time. Totally covered. Because if some woman saw them, she would want to chase after them. So this is going on since time immemorial. So in the Ishopanishad, we have to learn that first mantra, that everything animate and inanimate is controlled and owned by the Lord. Everything animate and inanimate in the universe, not just in one place. It's controlled and owned by the Lord. So Prabhupada in that purport makes some very interesting statements that is very relevant to what we're going through today. So let me just read that. So yes, there's this wonderful purport, very long, but there's one sentence that is very relevant to what we're going through today. Prabhupada says, in modern society, there's always a great quarrel between the laborers and the capitalists. This quarrel has taken an international shape, and the world is in danger. Just as a side note, in '96, I was in Zurich, and Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was there. So we took a side trip to France, and then we came back to Switzerland, and then he had to go to the UN. So I said, what's going on? He said, there's this guy there that I've been cultivating. So the guy happened to be the UN person in charge of international labor relations. And he became attracted to Krishna consciousness. He told Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, I may have said this in the past couple of times, but very telling. He told Maharaj, he said, I really like you people. I like your chanting, I like your philosophy, I like your food, I like everything about you. But there are so many of my colleagues in the UN that they don't like you. And I can't figure out why. I couldn't, he said, for a long time I couldn't figure out why. And then I realized it's because of your 4 regulative principles. Meat eating, big business. Prostitution, big business. Gambling, huge business. Illicit sex, all of that, all of our principles, big business. And that's why they hate you. Because if you guys ever came to power, all of that will be gone. So many businesses would crash if the Hare Krishnas came to power. So anyway, Prabhupada goes on. Men face one another in enmity and snarl just like cats and dogs. Sri Ishopanishad cannot give advice to the cats and dogs, but it can deliver the message of Godhead to man through the bona fide acharyas, holy teachers. The human race should take the Vedic wisdom of Sri Ishopanishad and not quarrel over material possessions. One must be satisfied with whatever privileges are given to him by the mercy of the Lord. There can be no peace if the communists or capitalists or any other party claims proprietorship over the resources of nature, which are entirely the property of the Lord. So is this going on? Are they claiming proprietorship over the resources of nature? Of course. They think all the oil, all the gas, all the minerals, it all belongs to them. The capitalists cannot curb the communists simply by political maneuvering, nor can the communists defeat the capitalists simply by fighting for stolen bread. If they do not recognize the proprietorship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all the property they claim to be their own is stolen. Consequently, they will be liable to punishment by the laws of nature. Nuclear bombs are in the hands of both communists and capitalists. And if both do not recognize the proprietorship of the Supreme Lord, it is certain that these bombs will ultimately ruin both parties. Thus, in order to save themselves and bring peace to the world, both parties must follow the instructions of Sri Ishopanishad. So this is what's happening. Due to ignorance and false proprietorship, false ego, people inevitably fight with each other for so many reasons. Being on the bodily platform, claiming to be Russians or Americans or Ukrainians, or these are all. Now, it doesn't mean you don't have a right to protect yourself. Of course you do. If somebody attacks you, you don't just sit there and say, well, okay, I'm not this body, do what you want. No. We have a right to defend ourselves. According to the Vedas, Manu Samhita, 6 kinds of aggressors can be killed. Who knows? Give me one. Very good. A poison giver. One who sets fire to the house. An arsonist, in other words. Yes, one who kidnaps a person's wife. One who steals valuable land or grains or anything that's extremely valuable. And one who attacks with weapons of any kind. So these 6 kinds of aggressors can be killed. So, yes, we said that. One who plunders riches or takes valuable agricultural lands, yeah. So those are the 6 kinds. So yes, you have a right to defend yourself. That's a given. But it should not be done in a mood of extreme animosity, just like we were hearing this morning, Shavas was reading. And this is part of the steadiness that I was glorifying him for at his birthday. This is one of the features of New Dwarka, this reading after Mangalarti, reading Bhagavatam or some literature. And Subhas asked me one day, should I stop? Am I boring the devotees? I said, no, it's one of the features of New Dwarka. And there's another feature that we used to have that's missing, I wish we'd go back to, and that's distributing Mahaprasadam right after class. Because of code, we stopped. But anyway, so we have these specific features of New Dwarka that we should keep. And this reading right after Mangalartik is essential. So this morning he was reading how in Vedic culture it's so nice that even an enemy should be received in such a way they forget any inimical thoughts. And it specifically mentioned, even if you're a poor person, you should at least offer a straw mat for sitting, some water to drink, and some sweet words. So how off are we if we can't, even in a community of devotees who are supposed to be like-minded, we can't do that? we can't receive somebody nicely, say some sweet words, at least offer them some water if you can't buy a lassi at Govinda's. It's essential if we want to have a nice community to do these things. Take it seriously. We have to have this mentality of hospitality, first and foremost towards each other. Like they say, charity begins at home. And then from home it can spread out to the public. And one of the ways of spreading, and this is a plug, a shameless plug, is going out on Harinam. Going out on Harinam as a community is the best community building activity. I've noticed that. I've lived in different communities. 50 years now I'm in ISKCON, starting with New York. LA was second, and then back to New York, and then San Diego, and DC, or Potomac as they call it, Alachua, so many. Going out on Harinam is community building. So I'm going to read an excerpt from a letter Prabhupada wrote in 1969, just to drive home that point. Prabhupada says in that letter, in this age, chanting of Hare Krishna mantra is the prime business of the devotee. And preaching of this Hare Krishna mantra by outdoor sankirtan and propagation of literature is our more important business. Then he says, side by side, deity worship is recommended. But when there is a question of accepting one, so he mentioned three things, outdoor Harinam, book distribution, and deity worship. He said, but when there's a question of accepting one of them, we shall prefer to accept chanting of Hare Krishna mantra first. And why is that? We know from experience. If you go out on Harinam, you can do the rest of it. You can do the rest of it. You can distribute literature, you can distribute prasadam. Everything can happen on Harinam. Anything else can be included. Even deity worship. Just like we have Hollywood Harinam coming up. Halloween, Hollywood Harinam coming up. And whenever we do that, some devotees always bring out the Damodar deity at least. And they give people incense to wave, or they give them some flowers to offer. So when you go out on Harinam, you can do all of it. Deity worship, book distribution, everything, prasadam distribution. So please, again, it's a shameless plug. Last night we had Harinam in Santa Monica. I had to come back a little early, so I drove my own car. So I was there first, and it was kind of amusing to see Arcita Prabhu playing mridanga and 4 Matajis in front of him. That was the Harinam party until I joined. And then later on, a couple of other devotees came. But that's okay. Harinam can be a party of one. Brigapati remembers our godbrother who's now gone, Siddhavida. We first met him in Brooklyn, then he moved to Miami. And he was famous in Miami for going out on Harinam by himself. If there was no one else available, he would go out with cartels and chant up and down the business streets. And the business people became so enamored of him. They loved him so much. They would, hey Sid, hey, and give him donations. They were just in love with Sid. So when he passed away, they were all devastated. So Harinam can be a party of one, and it can be effective. We shouldn't think, but of course we have to be realistic. Like last night, Mother Karuna was asking, can we go on the pier? There's so many people there saying, yeah, well, we have such a small party. When you have a small party, you don't go into a place where it's noisy and so many people. You just get drowned out. But it would be nice if we had so many devotees coming out that we could split in two, and one party could go down to the pier and the other one could stay on the promenade. So again, a shameless plug, keep it in mind. Please try to come out on Fridays. And the brahmacharis and brahmacharinis, they tend to come out, but our householders are here a little bit lagging in that regard. And I remember when I was in San Diego in the early 90s, Bhajanarayan, he was still not Swami yet, he was the temple president. He personally would round everybody up very strongly, forcefully. Even the householders with children, come, bring the pram, push them in front of you. Everybody should come out for Harinam. And we used to go to one of the richest areas in San Diego, La Jolla, and chant up and down in front of all these ritzy stores and so many tourists and whatnot. And it was a big hit. People loved it. So again, shameless plug. So getting back to the point today that Kapila Dev is making today, Vihuti, that there are 4 internal subtle senses. We all have them, so we should be aware of them and what their functions are. So the first one is mind. Everybody has a mind. The mind is always mulling over ideas for sense gratification. That's the business. Accepting and rejecting thoughts for sense gratification. And then intelligence is the next one, and the business of the intelligence. Prabhupada defines in the Bhagavad Gita, intelligence means ability to discriminate between spirit and matter and to know the source of both. But the general function of the intelligence, again, this is discriminate. So when the mind presents all these ideas of what to do, what not to do, the intelligence should be honed so sharply that it rejects anything that is not good for progress in spiritual life and accepts only those things that are good for progress in spiritual life. That's the business of the intelligence. And the spiritual master is supposed to train the disciple in such a way that we develop intelligence that's like a razor. We can immediately distinguish and reject anything that's not going to be good for progress in spiritual life and accept only those things that are good for progress in spiritual life. But that requires discipline. So Prabhupada said, there's no question of disciple without discipline. No question of being a disciple if you're not disciplined. In other words, this disciple should always be in the mood of wanting to be disciplined by the spiritual master, not avoiding discipline. Another story I've told probably a couple of times. I was in New York in, I think it was 88, 89, and there was one brahmachari there one day. I noticed he was packing. I said, so, where are you going? He said, I'm going to Los Angeles. So remember, 88, 89, this is before internet and email and all that stuff. So I said, why? Why are you going to LA? And he was honest. He said, my guru is coming to New York, and I have a feeling he's going to give me some order that I don't want to carry out. So rather than getting an order and refusing it, which is aparad, I'm going to go away. Again, because in those days, the guru couldn't just send an email and say, come back, you know. So discipline has to be there. Otherwise, one cannot become really a disciple. And if one submits oneself to be disciplined, this is the discipline that the spiritual master enforces. Come to the program, engage in some practical service, study the books, study the books, study the books, go out for street sankirtan. In our days, the early days, we used to go out every day. Nowadays, we're only asking go out one day, at least one day. Of course, if you can organize other days to go out, as sometimes the brahmacharis do, fine. But at least one day, we should go out as a community and chant Hare Krishna. So mine, coming up with ideas for sense gratification, intelligence to discriminate what's good and what's not good. Then ego, we know real ego is that I'm a servant of Krishna. Not even directly a servant of Krishna. That one should want to be seen as a servant of the servant of the servant. That's where that phrase comes from, that verse. Majjanmanam manarinam madakaitavhare. Matpartaniya yadanugra esha esha. Vṛttyā vṛttyā paricārika vṛttyā vṛttyā. Vṛttyā vṛttyā itimang smara lokanatha. He's saying, my dear Lokanath Krishna, the highest gift that you can give me and the perfection of my life is if you will think of me as a servant of the servant of the servant of your servant, like that. So real ego means to think of oneself as not even directly a servant of Krishna, but the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. And then contaminated consciousness, real consciousness is that I exist, I am not this body, I am a spirit soul. That is real consciousness. Contaminated consciousness means, as Prabhupada said here in today's purport, that one is falsely thinking that one is this body, and all of that negativity that develops from that. Thinking that I'm black, I'm white, I'm fat, I'm thin, I'm young, I'm old, I'm communist, I'm capitalist. All of that is false. So I'll end with a nice poem that Bhedo wrote once that encapsulates that. It says, I am not black, I am not white, I am not yellow or green, I am not a boy, I am not a girl, I am not in between, I am the servant of 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 the Lord. Hare Krishna. No questions? No comments? Okay, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.